I never thought a stupid New Year's resolution would change my life. Not because I actually expected to stick with it. I never did. Every January, I'd promise myself I'd start eating better, work out more, finally become one of those people who woke up before sunrise without hating the world. By February, I'd be sleeping through alarms and ordering takeout like nothing had happened. This year was supposed to be exactly the same, until I saw him. My name's Dustin, I'm 26, and at the time I was working remotely as a video editor. My entire life revolved around sitting at my desk, drinking way too much coffee, and telling myself I'd exercise tomorrow. Tomorrow became 6 months. Then my doctor looked over my latest blood work, sighed, and said, "Nothing alarming, but you're heading in the wrong direction." That hit harder than I expected. So the next morning, while it was still dark outside, I dragged myself out of bed, threw on an old hoodie, and decided I'd at least try running. I hated every second of it. The cold air burned my lungs. My legs felt like concrete, and I wasn't even sure I could call what I was doing running. It was more like aggressively jogging while questioning every life decision that had brought me there. 5 minutes in, I nearly turned around. Then someone passed me. He wasn't sprinting. He wasn't showing off. He just moved with this effortless rhythm, like he'd done it 1,000 times before. Gray hoodie, black running shorts, dark hair that kept falling across his forehead before he pushed it back without breaking stride. He gave me a quick nod as he passed. Morning. That was it. One word. But for some reason, it made me keep going another 5 minutes. When I finally stumbled back to my apartment, I collapsed onto my couch and swore I wasn't doing that again. The next morning, I went anyway, mostly because I didn't want to waste the expensive running shoes I'd impulsively bought. Definitely not because I hoped I'd see the guy again. At least, that's what I kept telling myself. Around the same spot near the river trail, there he was. Same hoodie, same easy pace. This time he slowed just enough to match my speed. "Second day?" he asked. I looked over, already out of breath. Is that obvious?" He laughed. "Only because yesterday looked exactly like my first day." "You were struggling too?" "Oh, it was embarrassing." I looked him up and down. "I don't believe that." "You don't have to." He smiled. "I'm Rory, by the way." "Dustin." We shook hands without stopping, which immediately turned awkward because neither of us could keep our balance. He laughed again. "Yeah, don't do that while running." "Noted." For the next minute or two, we ran side by side, mostly in silence. It wasn't uncomfortable, actually. It was surprisingly easy. "So," Rory finally said, "resolution?" I nodded. "Doctor guilt." "Ouch." "You?" He shrugged. "I've been running for years." "Then why are you on the beginner trail?" He smiled to himself. "I like it here." That's not an answer. I know. Before I could ask anything else, he checked his watch. "I head this way." He pointed toward another path. "See you tomorrow, Dustin." Then he was gone. I stood there watching him disappear before realizing I was literally staring after a stranger. "Get it together," I muttered to myself. The next morning, he wasn't there. Neither was the morning after that. By day 4, I felt ridiculous for even noticing. He was just some guy. People had schedules, lives. Maybe he'd switched routes. Maybe he'd been visiting someone. Maybe... "You're slowing down." I nearly jumped. Rory had somehow appeared beside me again. "Where did you come from?" "The parking lot." "You've been gone." "I had early meetings." I tried very hard to sound casual. "Oh, you sound disappointed." "I do not." "You kind of do." I was just... I searched for an excuse. "Wondering if I'd imagined you." He laughed. "I get that a lot." "No, you don't." "No." He grinned. "I don't." There was something dangerously easy about talking to him. No awkward pauses, no forcing conversation. It just happened. He asked what I did for work. I told him. Turns out he was a physical therapist at a sports clinic about 15 minutes away. "So you help people recover from injuries?" "Mostly. And here I am voluntarily creating one." You'll survive. You sound unconvinced. I'm trying to stay professional. I didn't hire you. You might someday. I hope not. So do I. We both laughed. By the end of that run, I realized something strange. I'd gone almost twice as far as I usually managed, without noticing. Over the next 3 weeks, something became routine. I'd wake up before my alarm, get dressed, head to the trail, and somewhere between the parking lot and the river, I'd find Rory. Sometimes we'd run together for 20 minutes, sometimes an hour, sometimes we'd barely talk. Other mornings we'd spend the entire run arguing about movies, music, terrible coffee, or whether pineapple belonged on pizza. It absolutely didn't. Rory was objectively wrong. You only hate it because you're scared. I'm scared of bad decisions. It's fruit. It's a crime. He laughed so hard he actually had to stop running. People passing us looked confused. I didn't even care. Somewhere along the way, I realized I wasn't waking up early because I wanted to exercise anymore. I was waking up because I wanted to see him. And that scared me a little because I knew almost nothing about him, just enough to know he made mornings feel easier. I had no idea that before spring arrived, one unexpected invitation from Rory was about to change everything. The first time Rory asked me to grab coffee after our run, I almost said no, not because I didn't want to, because I wanted to a little too much. I stood outside the little cafe across from the trail, pretending to stretch while secretly trying to slow my breathing. Rory noticed immediately. You know we're done running, right? I know. You don't have to keep pretending. I'm not pretending. He raised an eyebrow. Dustin. Fine. I dropped my arms. I forgot how to act like a normal human. He laughed. I had a feeling. The cafe was small, the kind of place where everyone seemed to know each other. The barista greeted Rory by name before he even reached the counter. The usual, she asked. You know it. She looked at me. And for your friend? Friend. For some reason, hearing that word made something warm settle in my chest. I'll just have a latte. Rory glanced over. Good choice. You judging my coffee order? Absolutely. Already regretting coming. Liar. He was smiling. We found a table by the window overlooking the river trail we'd just finished. For the first time since meeting him, we weren't distracted by running. It felt different. So, Rory said, wrapping both hands around his mug. Tell me something about yourself that I wouldn't guess. I thought about it. I used to play piano. His eyebrows lifted. Really? For almost 10 years. What happened? College? Work? Life? You miss it? I looked down into my coffee. Sometimes. He nodded like he understood that feeling without needing an explanation. My turn, he asked. Go for it. I wanted to be a firefighter. I blinked. I definitely wouldn't have guessed that. I was obsessed with it as a kid. What changed? My knee. He tapped it lightly. Tore a ligament playing soccer when I was 19. Recovered fine, but it changed a lot of plans. So you became a physical therapist. Figured I'd help people get back to doing what they love. There wasn't any bitterness in his voice, just acceptance. I admired that. So, he asked, you always this quiet? I'm talking. Barely. I'm pacing myself. You edit videos for a living but don't like talking? I spend all day listening to other people's voices. Fair point. And you're always this energetic? You mean annoying? I was trying to be polite. He laughed so loudly that a couple across the room smiled at us. It should have been awkward. Instead, it felt natural, like we'd known each other much longer than a month. Coffee became part of the routine, not every day, maybe twice a week. Sometimes we'd sit for 20 minutes, sometimes over an hour. We started learning the little things. Rory couldn't stand horror movies. I couldn't stand olives. He always read the last page of a book before buying it. I thought that was completely insane. It's not insane, he argued. It tells me if the ending is worth the journey. It ruins the journey. It enhances it. You're impossible. So I've been told. I found myself smiling more than I had in years, even at work. My coworkers on video calls started asking why I suddenly looked so awake. I blamed the running. That wasn't exactly a lie. About 6 weeks after we met, I overslept. My phone battery had died overnight. By the time I reached the trail, it was almost an hour later than usual. I figured Rory would already be gone. Instead, he was sitting on a bench overlooking the river, looking at his watch. When he saw me, he stood. There you are. I frowned. Were you waiting? You've never been late. So you waited? He shrugged. I figured something happened. You could have just gone home. I could have? But you didn't? No. I wasn't sure why that affected me as much as it did. Nobody had waited for me like that in a very long time. Sorry, I said quietly. He waved it off. Everything okay? My phone died. That's it? That's it. He smiled. Good. We started jogging. We started. Neither of us spoke for the first few minutes. Finally, I looked over. You really waited an hour? I had nowhere else to be. You could have texted. I don't have your number. Oh, right. How had we talked almost every morning for 6 weeks without exchanging numbers? Rory seemed to realize the same thing. That's actually kind of weird. A little. He pulled out his phone. Let's fix that. A minute later, my phone buzzed. Rory, now you can't disappear. I looked up. You text fast. I like efficiency. I'll remember that. The messages started small. Morning. Trail's icy today. Be careful. Coffee after? Then they slowly drifted into the rest of the day. A picture of an overly dramatic sunset. A complaint about impossible clients. A joke about someone attempting to run in flip-flops. A photo of Rory's failed attempt at baking banana bread. Me. That looks dangerous. Rory. It tastes worse. Me. Throw it away. Rory. I already made myself eat 2 slices. Me. Why? Rory. Because I'm stubborn. That tracked. One Saturday, neither of us had work. Instead of running, Rory suggested hiking. I promise it's easier. It better be. It definitely isn't. You lied already. I said I'd promise. That's not the same thing. He laughed. You catch on fast. The trail wound through a state park about 40 minutes outside the city. The trees were just starting to turn green again after winter. Everything smelled like damp earth and pine. For almost 3 hours we walked without checking our phones once. Somehow the conversation drifted from childhood memories to family. You close with yours? Rory asked. My parents live 2 states away. You visit? Not enough. He nodded. My mom calls every Sunday. You answer? I have to. Why? Because if I don't, she calls the clinic. I burst out laughing. She actually does that? Twice. That's terrifying. It really is. We reached the overlook just before noon. The river stretched below us, sunlight sparkling across the water. Neither of us spoke for a while, then Rory quietly said, You know. What? I'm glad you decided to start running. I looked over at him. I almost quit after the first day. I know. You knew? I could see it on your face. And yet you still said hi. I'm glad I did. For a second, it felt like there was something else behind those words. Something neither of us was quite ready to say. Then Rory smiled. So, he nudged my shoulder. Same time Monday? I smiled back. Yeah. Same time. I had no idea that Monday morning would be the first time I saw Rory truly scared. Monday started like every other morning. At least, I thought it would. I pulled into the parking lot a few minutes early, expecting to see Rory already stretching near the trail entrance like he always did. He wasn't there, that wasn't unusual. Sometimes I arrived first. I started warming up, glancing toward the parking lot every few seconds without meaning to. 5 minutes passed, then 10. I pulled out my phone. Me. You oversleep? No reply. I figured he'd just had an early patient or gotten stuck in traffic, so I started my run alone. It felt strange. I'd gotten so used to hearing his voice beside me that the trail suddenly seemed quieter than usual. About 20 minutes in, my phone vibrated in my pocket. Rory. Sorry. Emergency at work. Couldn't make it. I smiled despite myself. Me. Everything okay? A minute later. Rory. Yeah. Long story. Coffee tomorrow? Me. You're buying. Rory. Deal. The next morning he looked exhausted. Dark circles under his eyes. Hair slightly messier than usual. You look terrible, I said as soon as I saw him. Good morning to you too. I'm serious. He stretched one leg behind him. Didn't get much sleep. What happened? He sighed. One of my younger patients had surgery yesterday. His parents were terrified. You stayed late? Until almost midnight. You didn't have to. I know. But you did. He shrugged. It mattered. That was Rory. If someone needed him, he showed up. No questions asked. We ran in comfortable silence for a while before I finally said, You know? What? You care a lot. He looked over at me. I hope that's not a bad thing. It's not, I smiled. I think it's my favorite thing about you. The words came out before I could stop them. For half a second, neither of us spoke. Then Rory smiled. A small one, the kind that reached his eyes. Thanks. Something about the way he said it stayed with me all day. Spring settled in almost overnight. The cold mornings disappeared. The trees along the river exploded with green. Our heavy hoodies turned into t-shirts. The trail became crowded with runners and cyclists again. One Saturday morning we finished our run and collapsed onto the grass overlooking the water. I'm officially dead, I announced. No, Rory replied. If you were dead, I'd know. Oh? I'm literally a physical therapist. I don't think that's how it works. I'm 90% sure. You made that up. I absolutely did. I laughed, lying back against the grass. Clouds drifted slowly overhead. For several minutes, neither of us said anything. It was one of those silences that didn't need filling. Then Rory suddenly asked, Can I ask you something? Sure. Why haven't you dated anyone since I've known you? I blinked. That came out of nowhere. I've been wondering. I thought for a moment. I guess. I stared up at the sky. I got tired. Tired? Apps. Bad dates. People pretending to be someone they're not. You gave up? Maybe. He nodded slowly. I get that. What about you? His expression shifted. I've been busy. That's not an answer. It's the one you're getting. So mysterious? I try? I rolled my eyes. No, you don't. He laughed quietly. A week later, Rory texted me around lunchtime. Rory, busy tonight? Me. Depends. Rory, Community 5K this weekend. Me. You're joking. Rory, nope. Me. Absolutely not. 3 dots appeared immediately. Rory, come on. Me. I barely survive our morning runs. Rory, exactly. Me. That's not encouraging. Rory, I'll run with you. I stared at the message longer than I should have, then typed, Me. Fine. His reply came almost instantly. Rory, knew you'd say yes. Me. Confident. Rory, accurate. Race day arrived far too quickly. Hundreds of runners gathered near the starting line. Some looked terrifyingly athletic. Others wore ridiculous costumes. One man was dressed as a banana. I already want to go home, I muttered. Rory nudged my shoulder. You'll be fine. I won't. You will. What if I embarrass myself? You will. I looked at him. You're not helping. He grinned. But you'll survive it. The starting horn sounded. The crowd surged forward. For the first mile, I focused entirely on breathing. By mile 2, I was convinced I was dying. Rory stayed beside me the entire time, never pulling ahead, never telling me to go faster, just matching my pace. You okay? He asked. No. Good. What? If you're still complaining, you've got energy left. I hate you. No, you don't. Unfortunately, he was right. The last stretch curved along the river. People lined the path, cheering for complete strangers. I could see the finish line ahead. I can't. Yes, you can. My legs are done. Dustin. I looked over. He held out his fist. One last push. I bumped it, then somehow found enough energy to sprint the final 100 yards. We crossed the finish line together. I bent over with my hands on my knees, trying to remember how lungs worked. Rory was laughing. You did it. I might actually throw up. Probably. I blame you. I'll accept that. An elderly volunteer walked over and handed us each a participation medal. I looked down at the cheap piece of metal, then back at Rory. I haven't finished anything like this in years. He smiled. I know. How? I saw your face when you crossed. I looked away, suddenly embarrassed. You looked proud. I am. No. I am. His voice was quiet now. You've worked hard. For some reason. Those words meant more coming from him than anyone else. After the race, we stopped for breakfast, still sweaty, still exhausted, still wearing our medals because neither of us had bothered taking them off. Halfway through eating pancakes, Rory's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen. His smile disappeared. You okay? I asked. He locked the phone immediately. Yeah. You sure? Work. But it's Saturday. He hesitated. Sometimes work follows you home. Something in his voice told me not to push, so I didn't. But as we left the restaurant, I noticed something I'd never seen before. Rory looked worried, and whatever was bothering him was clearly much bigger than work. I tried not to think too much about the look on Rory's face after breakfast. Everyone had bad days. Everyone carried things they didn't always talk about. Still, it stayed in the back of my mind all week. The next few mornings, he was himself again, laughing, making terrible jokes, trying to convince me that pineapple still belonged on pizza. He was losing that argument badly. You'll come around eventually, he said. I'd rather quit running. That's dramatic. It's accurate. He shook his head. I've never met someone so stubborn. You literally ate your own burned banana bread. That's different. It really isn't. Friday afternoon, I was halfway through editing a project when my phone buzzed. Rory, need a favor? I smiled immediately. Me. Depends how illegal. Rory. Very dangerous. Me. Now I'm interested. A few seconds later, Rory. Help me move a couch. I laughed. Me. That's disappointing. Rory. Still coming? Me. Yeah. Send the address. Send the... I'd never been to Rory's apartment before. It was in a quiet neighborhood about 15 minutes from downtown. Nothing fancy, just a small brick building with flower boxes under the windows. He opened the door before I even knocked. You actually came. You sounded desperate. I was. He stepped aside. His apartment looked exactly how I'd imagined. Clean. Simple. Bookshelves packed with novels and anatomy textbooks. Running medals hanging from a hook near the hallway. A guitar leaning in one corner. You play? I asked. A little? You never told me. You never asked. Fair. The couch turned out to be much heavier than he'd claimed. I think you lied, I grunted. I absolutely lied. You owe me dinner. I was already planning on it. I stopped pushing? You were? Yeah. He looked almost embarrassed. I figured it was the least I could do. I smiled. Then I forgive you. We ordered Thai food after finally getting the couch into place. Neither of us had enough energy left to cook. We ate sitting on the floor because, technically, the living room still wasn't finished. This feels weird, I admitted. What does? Seeing where you live. In a good way or bad way? Good. I looked around again. It makes everything feel more real. He nodded slowly. I know what you mean. There were framed photographs on one shelf, mostly landscapes, a few family pictures. One caught my attention. Rory standing beside an older man wearing matching race bibs. You and your dad? His smile softened. Yeah. He runs too? He used to. What happened? He passed away. The room became very quiet. I'm sorry, I said. It was a few years ago. He stared at the photograph. Heart attack. I didn't know what to say, so I didn't try to fill the silence. After a minute, he smiled sadly. He was the reason I started running. I looked at him. We used to come out every Saturday morning. He laughed quietly. I hated it at first. Sounds familiar. Exactly. But eventually, he shrugged. It became our thing. I understood then. The trail wasn't just exercise for him. It was memory, routine, connection. I think he'd like you, Rory said suddenly. I blinked. What? My dad. He would have liked you. Heat crept into my face. You don't know that. I do? How? He liked people who listened. I looked down at my food. I don't do anything special. You really don't see it, do you? See what? The way people relax around you. I laughed awkwardly. I think you're giving me too much credit. No. He smiled. I'm not. The evening stretched much longer than either of us planned. Dinner turned into coffee. Coffee turned into music. At some point, Rory picked up the guitar. I haven't played in months. Play something. I'll be rusty. I don't care. He adjusted the strings and then quietly started playing. It wasn't complicated, just a soft acoustic melody. Simple. Comforting. When he finished, I realized I'd been smiling the entire time. What? He asked. Nothing. Dustin. I shook my head. I didn't know you could do that. I'm out of practice. I wasn't talking about the guitar. He looked at me curiously. You make everything feel calm. For a moment, neither of us moved. His eyes stayed on mine just a second longer than usual. Then his phone rang. The moment disappeared. He glanced at the screen and sighed. I should take this. Go ahead. He stepped onto the balcony, closing the sliding door behind him. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but I couldn't help noticing the change in his expression. He wasn't smiling anymore. He looked frustrated, then worried. He ran a hand through his hair before finally ending the call. When he came back inside, I pretended I hadn't noticed. Everything okay? He hesitated. My mom. Is she all right? Yeah. He forced a smile. She's just worried about me. Why? He looked toward the window. She thinks I spend too much time alone. I laughed. She clearly hasn't met me. No. He smiled faintly. I guess she hasn't. As I was leaving, Rory walked me downstairs. The evening air was warm, the parking lot almost empty. Thanks for helping today, he said. Thanks for dinner. We stood beside my car for a moment. Neither of us seemed in a hurry to leave. Finally, I opened the driver's door. I'll see you tomorrow morning. He nodded. Bright and early. I climbed into the car, then heard him say, Dustin? I looked back. I'm really glad we met. The words caught me off guard. I smiled. Me too. Driving home, I couldn't stop replaying that conversation in my head, because somewhere between moving a couch, sharing dinner on the floor, and listening to Rory play guitar, something had quietly changed. I wasn't just looking forward to seeing him anymore. I was starting to miss him whenever he wasn't around, and that realization scared me more than I wanted to admit. I just didn't know Rory had been fighting the exact same feeling. The next morning, I woke up before my alarm. For the first time in months, it wasn't because I wanted to go for a run. It was because I wanted to see Rory. That realization followed me all the way to the trail. He was already there, sitting on the same bench where he'd once waited an hour because I'd overslept. He looked up when I walked over. You're early. So are you. I've been here 10 minutes. I've been awake for an hour, he smiled. Couldn't sleep? Something like that. Neither of us said what we were really thinking. Instead, we started running. About halfway through our usual route, Rory slowed to a walk. You okay? I asked. Yeah. You sure? He nodded toward the river. Mind if we take a break? We sat on the wooden railing overlooking the water. The sun had just started climbing above the trees, turning everything gold. I've been meaning to tell you something, Rory said quietly. The seriousness in his voice immediately caught my attention. What is it? He rubbed the back of his neck. My mom wants me to move home. I blinked. Home? About 3 hours away. I thought she lived near the coast. She does. I waited. My clinic offered me a promotion. That's good, isn't it? It is. But the promotion is at one of their other locations. My stomach tightened. So you'd have to move. He nodded once. For at least a year. Neither of us spoke. I wasn't sure why the thought hit me so hard. We'd only known each other for a few months. But somehow, the idea of our mornings ending felt impossible. When do you have to decide? I finally asked. 2 weeks. I looked out over the river. That's not much time. No. You know what you're going to do? I honestly don't. That conversation stayed with me all day and all weekend. I kept telling myself it wasn't my decision. If the promotion was good for Rory, of course he should take it. He deserved every opportunity. So why did the thought of him leaving make my chest feel heavy? The following Tuesday, we skipped our run because it was pouring rain. Instead, Rory texted me. Rory, movie, me. Only if you're buying popcorn. Rory, deal. We met at a small independent theater downtown. It was almost empty. The movie itself wasn't even that memorable. Neither of us paid much attention. We spent most of it whispering sarcastic commentary. I'm pretty sure that's not how hospitals work, Rory muttered. You would know. I definitely would. And? He's been unconscious for 20 minutes. So? Nobody's hair looks that perfect. I laughed loud enough that the couple in front of us glanced back. You're the worst. I've been told. Afterward, we walked through the rain without opening our umbrellas, mostly because neither of us wanted the evening to end. You know, Rory said, I haven't laughed this much in a long time. You laugh every morning. Not like this. I looked over. What changed? He smiled. You showed up. I felt my heartbeat stumble. Before I could answer, his phone buzzed. He glanced at it. His smile faded. My mom? He nodded. You should answer. I'll call her back. You sure? I'd rather be here. The words settled somewhere deep inside me. A few days later, I was editing a project when my phone rang. Rory, I answered immediately. Hey. His voice sounded strained. Dustin. What happened? My car won't start, I laughed. That's the emergency? I know nothing about engines. You called the right person. You know about engines? No. So, how are you helping? I know how to call roadside assistance. He laughed. There you are. What? I've been waiting for you to make a dumb joke. You're welcome. An hour later, I was standing beside him in a grocery store parking lot while a mechanic replaced his dead battery. I owe you. You owe me coffee. Done. And breakfast. Greedy. I'm taking advantage of the situation. You absolutely are. When the mechanic finished, Rory leaned against his car and looked at me. You came pretty fast. You sounded stressed. I was. I know. He was quiet for a moment. You always show up. The comment surprised me. So do you. No. He shook his head. I mean, for me. I shrugged. That's what friends do. The word left my mouth naturally. Friends. Rory looked down at the pavement. Yeah. For some reason. He sounded disappointed. That evening I couldn't stop thinking about his reaction. Had I imagined it? Maybe. Maybe not. The problem was I didn't know what I wanted the answer to be anymore. Because somewhere between the morning runs, the coffee, the hikes, the movie nights, and every random conversation in between. I'd stopped seeing Rory as just my favorite part of the morning. He'd quietly become my favorite part of every day. The only question was, did he feel the same? I was about to find out sooner than either of us expected. The answer came on a Thursday morning, completely by accident. I got to the trail before sunrise and didn't see Rory anywhere. Thinking he was running late, I started stretching near the parking lot. A familiar voice carried across the cool morning air. "I know, Mom." It was Rory. He was standing a few spaces away beside his car, phone pressed to his ear. He hadn't noticed me yet. "I haven't decided." A pause. "No. It's not just the job." I looked away, not wanting to overhear. Then he sighed. "Because there's someone here." I froze. "I know that sounds ridiculous." Another pause. "No, I haven't told him." My heart started beating a little faster. "It's complicated." He rubbed his forehead. "I don't even know if he feels the same." For a second, I honestly wondered if I should leave before he saw me. But before I could move, he turned around. Our eyes met. His expression immediately changed. "Dustin." He quickly ended the call. "I'm sorry," I said. "I wasn't trying to listen." "I know." The silence that followed felt heavier than any we'd ever shared. "You heard that?" I nodded once. "I heard enough." He looked down at the ground. "I wasn't planning for you to find out like that." "Find out what?" He laughed quietly, though there wasn't much humor in it. "That I'm an idiot." "I don't think you're an idiot." "No?" "No." He took a slow breath, then looked directly at me. "The person I was talking about," my pulse jumped, "is you." Everything around us seemed to go quiet. The distant traffic, the birds, even the runners passing by. I just stood there staring at him. "I know," Rory said softly. Not exactly the smoothest confession. "You..." I couldn't find the words. "You like me?" He smiled nervously. "I've liked you for a while." "Since when?" He laughed under his breath. "Honestly?" I nodded. "Probably around the time you argued with me for 20 minutes about pineapple on pizza." I blinked. "Seriously?" "You looked way too proud of yourself." Despite everything, I laughed. "That's a terrible reason." "I had better ones." "Like?" "The way you kept showing up." His voice was steady now. "The way you always listened. The way you celebrated every tiny running milestone like it actually mattered." "It mattered because you're you." He smiled sadly. "I kept telling myself it would pass." "It didn't." "No." I stared at him. My mind was racing, not because I didn't know how I felt, because suddenly every moment from the past few months made perfect sense. The waiting on the bench, the long coffees, the guitar, the movie, the way he'd looked disappointed when I called us friends. "You don't have to say anything," Rory added quickly. "I just..." He shrugged helplessly. "I didn't want to leave without telling you." "Leave?" The word hit me immediately. "The promotion." He nodded. "I have to give them an answer tomorrow." Tomorrow. I took one step closer, then another, until we were standing only a couple of feet apart. "You know what the funny part is?" I said. "What?" "I've spent the last month trying to convince myself I only looked forward to running." Rory watched me carefully. "But it was never the running." His eyes softened. "It was you." For the first time since I'd met him, Rory looked completely speechless. "I thought I was imagining everything," I admitted. "I wasn't sure." "I wasn't either." We both laughed, mostly from relief. "So," Rory said carefully, "where does that leave us?" I smiled. "I think..." I reached out and lightly bumped his shoulder with mine. "It means we've both been pretty bad at communicating." He laughed. "Yeah, I'd say that's accurate." For a long moment, neither of us moved. Then Rory quietly asked, "Can I do something?" "You can ask." "I know." He smiled. "But can I?" I already knew what he meant. I nodded. "Yeah." He stepped closer, slowly, giving me every chance to change my mind. I didn't. When he kissed me, it wasn't dramatic. It wasn't rushed. Just gentle, careful, like we'd both been afraid of getting it wrong. When we finally pulled apart, neither of us could stop smiling. "I've wanted to do that," Rory admitted. "For how long?" He thought about it. "Longer than I'd like to admit." I laughed. "Good. Good? 'Cause I've wanted you to." He shook his head. "We really wasted a lot of time." "We did, but—" I looked toward the trail. "I still want to go for our run." He smiled. "Me too." So we ran. Not because we needed the exercise, because, for the first time, we weren't wondering anymore. The only problem left was tomorrow. Because tomorrow Rory had to decide whether he was staying or moving 3 hours away. I don't think either of us actually slept that night. After our run, we grabbed coffee like we always did, but everything felt different in the best possible way. Not awkward, just lighter. Every smile lingered a little longer. Every accidental touch wasn't accidental anymore. At one point, Rory reached across the table and quietly intertwined his fingers with mine. No big speech, no dramatic moment, just a simple gesture. I looked down at our hands and smiled. "This is nice." He squeezed my hand gently. "It is." Around noon, Rory texted me. "Rory, want to help me make a decision?" I already knew what he meant. Me. "I'm on my way." He was sitting on the balcony when I arrived. 2 mugs of coffee sat on the small table between us. "You look nervous," I said. "I am." I sat beside him. "So?" He stared out over the parking lot. "I've spent the last week making pros and cons lists." "Did it help?" "Not even a little." I smiled. "Sounds about right." He laughed quietly. "The promotion's good." "I know." "The pay's better." "I know." "I'd be closer to my mom." "I know." He finally looked at me. "But I'd be leaving everything I've built here." His eyes held mine. "And everyone." I understood what he wasn't saying. "You don't have to choose because of me." "I know." "I'm serious." "So am I." I leaned back in my chair. "If taking the job is what you really want—" I forced myself to finish the sentence. "I'll support you." Even though saying the words hurt more than I expected. Rory was quiet for a long time, then he smiled. "You know why I like you so much? Because I finally admitted pineapple doesn't belong on pizza." "You never admitted that." "I was hoping you'd forgotten." "I haven't." He reached over and took my hand again. "I like you because, even now—" He shook his head. "You're thinking about what's best for me." "I am." "I know." He looked toward the skyline. "But I already figured out what that is." Around 3 that afternoon, Rory asked if I'd sit with him while he called the clinic. "You don't have to." "I want to." He nodded, then dialed. I could only hear his side of the conversation. "Hi, Karen." A pause. "Yeah, I've made my decision." He glanced at me. "No." Another pause. "I'm turning the promotion down." I blinked. Rory smiled softly. "I appreciate the opportunity." Another pause. "I know." He nodded several times. "Thank you for understanding." A few more words, then he hung up. The apartment fell completely silent. "You stayed?" "I stayed." I searched his face. "You sure?" He didn't hesitate. "Completely." "What about your mom?" "I'll visit more." "The promotion?" "There will be others." He smiled. "But there won't be another chance to build something that already feels this important." For a second, I couldn't speak. "You really mean that?" "I've never been more sure of anything." I crossed the small space between us and hugged him. Really hugged him. He wrapped both arms around me immediately. I was terrified, he admitted quietly. So was I. I thought I'd waited too long. You didn't. I almost left without telling you. I'm really glad you didn't. So am I. That evening we went back to the river trail, not to run, just to walk. The sunset painted the water orange and gold. Families were packing up picnics. Cyclists rolled past. Everything looked exactly the same, and somehow completely different. This bench, Rory said, pointing ahead. The one where I waited for you? I laughed. An entire hour. I was worried. My phone died. I know. We sat down together. You know something funny? I asked. What? If my doctor hadn't guilt tripped me, you would have stayed home. I would have. He smiled, and if I'd chosen a different trail, we probably never would have met. He bumped my shoulder gently. I'm glad neither of those things happened. Me too. We sat quietly watching the river. Then Rory looked at me with that familiar smile. So, what? Tomorrow morning? I laughed. We're still running. Good. I've gotten used to it. You mean you've gotten used to me? I pretended to think about it. Maybe a little. A little? I smiled. Okay. I slipped my hand into his. A lot. He laughed. I'll take it. As the last light disappeared behind the trees, I realized something that hadn't occurred to me before. Months earlier, I'd started running because I wanted to change my life. I just hadn't realized the biggest change would never be about exercise. It would be about the man sitting beside me. And somehow, that felt like the easiest decision I'd ever made. 6 months later, my alarm still went off at 5:45 every morning. The funny thing was, I didn't need it anymore. My body had gotten used to the routine. I pulled on my running shoes, grabbed my keys, and headed toward the trail with a coffee balanced in one hand. When I reached the parking lot, Rory was already there. He looked up from tying his shoe. You're 30 seconds late. I held up the second coffee. I had priorities. He accepted it with a grin. I forgive you. I was hoping you would. It had become our routine. Coffee, run, terrible jokes before sunrise. Neither of us ever got tired of it. Life wasn't magically perfect after we got together. There were busy weeks, long work days, days when one of us was exhausted and the other had to carry the conversation. But we'd built something simple, something steady. When I had a stressful deadline, Rory showed up at my apartment with dinner and refused to let me keep working. Laptop's closed. I've got 3 more hours. You'll have 3 more hours tomorrow. I really... Dustin, that look, the one that somehow always convinced me. I sighed dramatically. You're impossible. I know. When Rory had difficult days at the clinic, I'd meet him after work. Sometimes we walked along the river. Sometimes we sat in silence. He never needed me to fix anything, just to be there. I'd learned that was often enough. One Sunday afternoon, we drove to visit his mom. I was nervous. What if she doesn't like me? Rory laughed from the driver's seat. She's been asking about you for months. That's somehow worse. Relax. I am relaxed. You've adjusted your shirt 4 times. I wrinkle easily. You absolutely do not. When we arrived, his mom opened the front door before we'd even reached the porch. So, she smiled warmly. You're Dustin. I am. She hugged me before I could react. It's so nice to finally meet the man who convinced my son to smile at his phone all the time. I looked at Rory. You told her that? I might have. His mom rolled her eyes affectionately. He didn't just tell me. She smiled at me. He wouldn't stop talking about you. Rory covered his face. Mom. What? You wouldn't. I absolutely would. I couldn't stop laughing. Later that afternoon, while Rory helped his mom carry groceries inside, I wandered into the backyard. There was an old wooden bench beneath a large oak tree. Beside it sat a faded pair of running shoes. I recognized them immediately from the photograph in Rory's apartment, his dad's. A quiet voice interrupted my thoughts. He could never bring himself to throw them away. I turned. Rory's mom had joined me. He always said those shoes reminded him of happier mornings. She smiled gently. Rory told me you've been running together since you met. Almost every day. She nodded. You've given him something back. I frowned. What do you mean? After his father passed, she looked toward the shoes. He kept running because he felt like he had to. A small smile crossed her face. But lately, she glanced toward the kitchen window where Rory was laughing while unpacking groceries. He runs because he wants to. I felt a lump form in my throat. I didn't know. He probably doesn't even realize it himself. That evening on the drive home, I reached across the center console and took Rory's hand. What? He asked. I was just thinking. Dangerous. Very? He laughed. What about? I looked out at the road ahead. I'm really glad I started running. He smiled. I had a feeling. No. I shook my head. I mean it. I almost quit after 5 minutes that first day. I remember. You remember? You looked ready to throw your shoes into the river. I probably was. He laughed. I almost didn't say hello. That surprised me. Really? I figured you wanted to be left alone. What changed your mind? He thought about it for a second. You looked determined. I looked miserable. Both things can be true. I smiled. I'm glad you ignored your instincts. So am I. The following weekend, we signed up for another charity race. This one was a 10-kilometer run. Halfway through, I groaned dramatically. I officially regret this. Rory laughed. You said that at the 5-kilometer too. I meant it then. You still finished. My legs have learned nothing. They've learned plenty. He slowed slightly to match my pace. Remember your first morning? I try not to. You couldn't run 5 minutes. I know. Look at you now. I looked around, families cheering, kids handing out cups of water, the finish line waiting in the distance. Then I looked back at Rory. You know, what? I never actually started running because of my doctor. He raised an eyebrow. No? Not after the first week. So why did you keep showing up? I smiled. Because of you. He stopped running for just a second, then pulled me into a quick hug right there in the middle of the course. A volunteer laughed as we untangled ourselves. You guys planning to finish? I grinned. Yeah. Rory squeezed my hand once before letting go. Come on. We've got a race to finish. We crossed the finish line side by side, just like the first one. Only this time I wasn't wondering what came next. I already knew. The best part of my mornings had never been the miles, or the finish lines, or even becoming healthier. It had been finding someone who made getting out of bed before sunrise feel like the easiest decision in the world. People sometimes ask why I still run every morning. I always smile because the answer is simple. I started running every morning because of him. And after everything we've shared, I can't imagine starting my day any other way.